The opposition responded with an even larger demonstration, the largest Lebanon had ever seen. 1 million people massed in Martyrs Square, 1/4 of the entire country, and they wanted the Syrians out now. Syrian troops did begin to pull back toward Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, closer to the Syrian border. But there was still apprehension, a fear that Syria might try to wreck Lebanon on its way out. Sure enough, a series of car bombs hit the Beirut area.
There's an explosion, there's a dinner explosion. There are lots of, there's a huge depot where they have all the fuel, liquid fuel.
I was shaken by the damage. A car bomb had set a factory district ablaze, wounding several workers. The bombs that went off over the next 2 weeks, all in Christian neighborhoods, provoked fear that Lebanon might descend back into sectarian violence. In this neighborhood, everyone blamed the bombings on the Syrian and Lebanese intelligence services. Could the Syrians really be trusted to leave? I headed east over the mountains into the Bekaa Valley to see if the Syrians were indeed withdrawing. And there they were, packing up their military outposts, loading tanks on trucks, and heading home.
وانت مبسوط؟ معلش لازم نسألك؟ ماني مبسوط. كيف مانك مبسوط؟ يعني كم سنة موجودين الجيش السوري هون؟
30 سنة صار لهم هون. و30 سنة مقموعة حريتنا. هلا تنفرجنا وشفنا الهواء الطيب.
شو حلو يعني تاكل يعني الحرية.
ايه الحرية.
As I pressed on toward the Syrian border, I passed a steady stream of retreating trucks and soldiers. I wanted to see what all this would mean for Syria. It's just over a 2-hour drive between Beirut and Damascus. Lebanon was once part of Syria, and many Syrian nationalists still regard Lebanon as theirs. For me, arriving in Damascus always feels like a kind of homecoming. I spent several years here as a teenager while my father was posted at the American embassy. Damascus is a city of 2 million people. Walking around, I couldn't escape the images of the ruling family. For the past 35 years, the Assads have governed Syria with an iron fist. First the father Hafez, who died in 2000, then his Western-educated son Bashar. When he came to power, Bashar promised reforms, but never really delivered. There's talk in Washington that Syria should be a target for regime change. But as I walked through the old city and its ancient marketplace, the souk, I was surprised to find how calm it was. You'd never know there was turmoil next door in Lebanon. Damascus is one of the world's oldest cities. Whenever I'm here, I feel suspended in time. At the heart of the city is the Umayyad Mosque. Once a Roman temple, then a church, the mosque is home to the tomb of St. John the Baptist. I noticed all over the souk new posters saying, Bashar, we're all with you.
نحن تضامنا مع سيادة الرئيس بشار الأسد. نحن شعب منحب سوريا ومنحب رئيس سوريا والدكتور بشار الأسد. نحن نؤمن بهذا يعني.
في بلد استقرار
وهون في سوريا ما في معارضة. ما في معارضة وما في حدا ضد الرئيس وما في حدا ضد الحزب.
I heard that kind of praise for Bashar from a lot of shopkeepers. But Syria is a police state and many people are afraid to speak openly. The Syrian government is defensive about the lack of freedoms here, not to mention the charges that they killed Rafiq Hariri.
Those who arranged the killing of al-Hariri were planning things against Syria and against Lebanon. It would be a political suicide for anybody in Syria to think of doing that. Syria is as interested as everybody in the world to find the truth of who killed al-Hariri, because it is in our interest to find the real perpetrator of that terrorist crime.
Shaban also says the Bush administration misunderstands the Syrian president.
How could they talk about Bashar al-Assad without talking to him? I think they should talk to him and know who he is before talking about him.
Why is he being compared to Saddam Hussein, then?
Absolutely stupid comparison, excuse me, very stupid. None in Syria would compare, none in the world would compare Bashar al-Assad to Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was a criminal against his own people and against Syrian people. So the comparison shows absolute lack of knowledge. And that's one of the big problems of the US policy in the Middle East.
Unlike Saddam Hussein, Bashar al-Assad is not guilty of mass murders or developing nuclear weapons. But Syria's Ba'ath Party rules under a state of emergency. There are many political prisoners, and the state-controlled economy is in trouble. I went to see one of the country's few outspoken dissidents. Ammar Abdulhamid is a blogger and runs an organization that defends minority rights.
So frankly, after 5 years, you just have to see the obvious and admit the obvious. This regime has not been good for this country anymore. You know, it's time for them to go. What I want is an orchestrated collapse, not necessarily the kind of sort of catastrophic collapse as a result of, some kind of an invasion.
Abdulhamid says he welcomes U.S. pressure on Syria to reform and democratize, but opposes U.S. military intervention.
I don't want to see insurgents, and I don't want to see the destruction of the infrastructure, and I don't want to see Abu Ghraibs happening here in Syria. What I want to see is a peaceful change in this country, a long overdue change. And despite my vehement criticism of this regime, I still hope that they will be able to understand that the reason for this criticism is my desire to really avoid having to see an Iraqi-style scenario unfolding in Syria.
The war in Iraq is on Syria's doorstep. It's a source of tension between the U.S. and Syria. I set off for the Iraq border to see what was happening there. It's a 6.5-hour drive through the Syrian desert. The only break in the journey is the oasis of Palmyra. Wandering through these Roman ruins, I thought of all the armies that for centuries have marched across this desert. That afternoon, I finally reached the Syrian border. It's tense here. The Abu Kamal crossing has been closed for several months. At first, the Syrian border guards wouldn't let us film, but we kept our camera rolling. After a while, they let us behind their offices. And there in front of us was a U.S. Marine base. Camp Gannon, where several hundred Marines are stationed, is an outpost in one of the most troubled provinces in Iraq. The U.S. government accuses the Syrians of not doing enough to stop Arab fighters from crossing this border. Recently, under pressure from the U.S., the Syrians have reinforced a sand wall along the 600-mile border. And beyond that, I could see that the Americans had built an even larger barrier.
The Syrians say that the Americans have been coming under almost nightly mortar attack from the Iraqi resistance, and they've told us that it's not safe for us to be here beyond dark.
In fact, just after we left, insurgents tried to overrun the base. In response, the U.S. launched a major offensive, killing 100 fighters. I wanted to learn more about the Arab fighters who Washington says are slipping across the Syrian border. In the seedy frontier town of Al-Hiri, down the dusty back streets, I found a tribal leader who'd fought in Iraq, Sheikh Rutha Baruth Dulaimi.
الضيف احنا نحيي الضيف ونهلي بالضيف ونرحب بالضيف هاي طرقنا احنا يا شيوخ.
شو القصة عن الأحمر والأزرق هون الألوان؟ في قصة؟ في؟
لا أقول لك حطي ذيك. فهمتيني رأسا. فهمتيني رأسا.
قل لي شو القصة؟
إيطالي. أمريكا.
The Sheikh explained to me that he put it there to signal to American planes that he's not an enemy.
هون فوق بيتك؟
حيونا وراحوا.
وفي كسف منهم يعني لا بس هيك
كسف ما في بس عرض يعني ديروا بالكم بروح نجيكم.
He was evasive about his time in Iraq, but not about his sympathies.
أنا كنت أتمنى إنه أكون أثناء القصف أو مع هالناس انقصفت حتى يقولون الشيخ الدليمي راح شهيد.
I asked Dulaimi and his sons if fighters were still crossing over to Iraq.
الحدود مسكر ممنوع أحد يفوت من هون. من هون ممنوع.
يا عمو الحدود.
هم يقاومون لحالهم العراقيين.
طبعا رئيس لا فاحنا شي يتكلم الرئيس الموافق.
It seems that a new line has come down from Damascus, and people like Dulaimi have gotten the message.
هذا السؤال سياسي ما نقدر نجاوبك عليه. إما منعنا كمواطنين ما نعبر.
كلكم مع الرئيس.
مع الرئيس سيد الرئيس كنا معه. أمو بالروح بالدم نفديك يا بشار. بالروح بالدم نفديك يا بشار.
بالروح بالدم نفديك يا بشار. بالروح بالدم نفديك